So Laura's right, the transformation precision targeting is quite difficult to say when you speak really fast. But it's going to be an interesting conversation, lots to uncover here. We'll start with introductions. Nigel, I'll come to you first.
Hi, I'm Nigel Clarkson. I'm the Global Chief Revenue Officer for a company called TapTap Digital. We are a global omnichannel DSP, and we look at data through a contextual and location lens.
I'm Hannah Thompson, so I lead our Addressable product and strategy team at Kinesso, who are the activate. Thanks,
Wow.
Sean.
Hang on,
Okay.
I've actually got people here who can cheer for me.
Anyone going to cheer for? There we go. There we go.
Unfortunately, you don't have Sean. So, yeah, so we're the activation arm of IPG Media Brands.
Brilliant. Thank you. Emily?
Hiya, I'm Emily, Digital Director at AKA, so we're, and
I'm loving this.
Sean as well. So AKA is an independent marketing and creative agency working across mainly culture, entertainment and art sectors. So I'm the digital lead across a lot of those clients.
Thank you. And Chris?
Hi, everyone. Chris Keenan, Managing Partner, Global Solution Design. Thank you. I was worried. I look after our proprietary media solutions within GroupM Nexus, so advanced digital home, advanced TV, integrated commerce. It goes on and on. But very excited to be here today.
Brilliant. And obviously everyone's very excited to have you all here. Great. No one cheered for me, but that's fine. Whatever. Woo! Woo! A sympathy cheer. That's very kind. I do appreciate it. So before we kick off and getting into the nitty-gritty of things, there is a poll for this panel. So again, go into the ExchangeWire app, head to the section on the agenda for this panel, and you'll see a poll question, which we'll bring up later to discuss amongst the panelists. I want to kick off, and I'm going to come to you, Hannah, to basically give us all a definition of what precision targeting is. And then I want to kind of get a sense from all of you if you think it's still appropriate and still a kind of helpful phrase and terminology.
So the way that I would define it is that we're taking a defined audience, targeting them with low wastage, so high accuracy, so high on-target reach, and also we're doing that on purpose as well. So we're not just doing it by accident, we're actively going out and seeking that audience and using whatever signals we can to find them where they are.
Great. And I'm assuming everyone's happy with that.
Can I build on it?
Cool, please do.
The other thing I would think about is really the actual precise moments in time as well. So it's not just the audience in terms of a one-to-one type of relationship or messaging or comms. It's precise moments in time where you're thinking about the geocontextual signals that are coming to play as well. So if you think about the concerts that have taken place at Wembley in the past few months, Taylor Swift is very different than the boxing match that's coming up in a few weeks. Same time, same place, same day of week. Very different audiences, very different contexts around that as well. So think about the occasions that you can use. If you're in London and it's been 5 days of cold, dreary rain in July, you're likely very responsive to a warm summer holiday somewhere else. So that's also where I would think about precision targeting. It's not just audiences and one-to-one, but occasions as well.
Absolutely, and I'm sure if you were English, you'd have mentioned the Nations League England-Finland game as an example that happened last night.
Yep.
But no, okay. Anyway, anyway, I want to move on to understanding why we've got to this stage where precision targeting is being defined the way it is, and kind of what we're looking at, kind of what the alternatives look like and how they're coming to bear. Nigel, I'm going to come to you and ask you what your perspective on the alternatives are to what cookie targeting looks like and how that fits in and feeds into precision targeting.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of background. When we first talked about this panel, it was originally going to be what's going to replace the cookie. And
exactly,
then
yes.
Google messed it up with their timing, so we've changed it to precision targeting. And there's been a lot of chat in the industry around only 45–50% of ads delivered at the moment have cookies anyway. So it feels like that journey away from cookies has already started. There's various different options for clients and customers to activate targeting now in different ways. One of them is location, there's context, there's different ID solutions. ID solutions feels like cookie with a sort of mask on. And I think I went to a conference, Media 360, sorry, I went to a different conference a few months ago, and, and they talked about the move away, and this is a very holistic debate, probably not for now, but that precision targeting is very much about one-to-one, precise. I looked at a shed, that shed's now going to chase me around the internet for the next month, and consumers think that that's weird and creepy, and the presenter on stage said, I've never been given a brief that was weird and creepy. So do we holistically, thank you for that laugh, do we have to think at a more senior level around what advertising means. In programmatic and ad tech, we are all about super targeting. Well, actually, advertising is around persuasion. And if you're only going to deliver an ad for a new cheese spread to somebody that you 100% know loves cheese spread, that's great. But there are hundreds of thousands of other consumers that look like that customer you could find. And so I think, we almost, as an ad tech industry, need to step back a bit from super creepy, super direct, and start having an understanding about how we can do slightly more targeted broadcast.
Very interesting. And Emily, I want to come to you and ask how that works for you, because obviously the way that you work at AKA is very niche. So how are you translating everything that Nigel said there into making sure that you're not delivering super creepy advertising to people that you're trying to get to come to West End shows, for example?
I mean, we do a bit of super creepy advertising, but I think there's a place for everything. Pardon?
A bit's okay.
Yeah, a little bit's okay. I think it's really important that we are super creative, and because we are always trying to find new audiences. What our product is ticket sales, as you mentioned, for some of the biggest West End shows. I mean, these shows have been in the West End for up to 40 years, so it's not something that people are going to go and see every week. So we're trying to find the gaps of where those audiences might be, as well as those who look like the people that have already bought. So it's a real mix of everything, really. So the precision targeting, but also the kind of prospecting is, it's full funnel. It's the proper marketing strategy.
I want to talk about the effectiveness of these alternatives, these kind of non-cookie and non-cookie with masks on alternatives. Chris, are they effective?
So cookies gave us a very is maybe the wrong term. They gave us a scaled and effective single signal to activate against. But what I would say here, though, there's actually many other signals that we should be thinking about as well. So there are online and offline data sets that we can now stitch together using different technologies like H3. Is everyone familiar with H3? Does that ring a bell to anyone?
Explain for those that might not be.
H3, it was actually originally developed by Uber back in 2017, 2018. And they essentially took a hexagon and a grid of hexagons across the entire globe and assigned each hexagon essentially identifier. And then you're able to actually do indexing against each of those hexagons to understand the propensity for different audience behaviors for that. And so the ability to now stitch together offline data sets against these geo keys, as we might refer to them, for understand the propensity for that, that's actually a highly effective way of understanding your audience, targeting your audience, measuring your audience in that way. And so you can take data sets you never thought possible, because we've been limited in terms of data that could be collected on the page via tag, via pixel, or data that's being passed through the bid stream by publishers. But we haven't really opened our eyes outside of that until recent years to be thinking about how can we be bringing in census data, data from Experian, data from kind of commerce or retail intelligence vendors about stock levels within the stores that you're actually selling your goods at. These are all capabilities now that do exist and that we should be taking into account as we're planning and integrating commerce intelligence across everything that we do.
Excellent. And so Hannah, how are you bringing all these different forms of targeting to bear and making them effective for your clients?
Yeah, so it's exactly as Chris said, it's all about how we combine the different data sets. So the cookie was one signal. We're still using cookies to an extent to be able to build these models and help build upon what we're building from, say, like a geo perspective, or using retailer data, or combining all of those different aspects. But effectively, yeah, exactly as Chris said, we're treating it as one signal, a signal that is also dying out, and is also has been significantly less effective in the recent years. Don't know if anybody's ever been on their sort of ad segments I fall into on Google page. It's really creepy. I wouldn't recommend doing it. But anyone who works in this industry will find that they probably are in a load of really wrong buckets, because obviously if you work on a client that's not actually relevant to you, you're probably going to end up falling in an in-market bucket for something that isn't relevant. Or for example, I don't have the Facebook app, so I'm in a load of audience segments from my partner because we have the same IP address. So there's a load of signals where they're alone and they're actually really ineffective, and actually the cookie's not been really fit for purpose for a long time. But if you combine it with all of these different other segments you can get, so geo, retailer data, as I mentioned, anything we can get actually from our clients' CRM systems and anything they know about their customers as well. Loyalty schemes is obviously a very big thing that's coming up now. Those kind of things, it's how we combine them to build audiences now, rather than looking at that specific one-to-one. You've seen a shed, so the shed's going to follow you around.
And Nigel, how does TapTap fit into this? How do you work with the likes of Hannah, Emily, and Chris to help them deliver that? Because obviously, people might be forgiven thinking TapTap, they think location, but there's a lot more to it than that, and it's bringing all these different things together. How are you helping make that work?
Yeah, so we're an independent ad tech business, so we try to work with anyone, any agencies, any clients, and you know, we, as Chris and Hannah both said, we look at online and offline data. And one of the challenges we face when we speak to clients and agencies, there's so much data that they've got access to, and you've just named 10 different data sets. Often they're very disparate data sets. They don't tell you the same thing. So you might get a data set which is telling you that demographic audience is right, but contextually they're horrible for that brand. And likewise, contextually somebody's perfectly relevant, but they're horrible for the demo that the client's got. So I know no sales pitches, but the way that our platform deals with it is that we will give...
Enter sales pitch.
Yeah, a mini, we'll call it a mini pitch.
I
We'll call it a Mitch,
question,
as a mini pitch.
so it's fine.
So we will give each one of those data sets a score on a location basis. So you know, in the real world and in the online world, we leave a footprint behind us, which has often got a GEOS stamp on it. So whether that's postcode data, census data, H3, H4 buckets, lat longs, GPS, SDK, there's loads of different data sets. But if you give each data set a score of how well it does in an area versus all the other areas in the UK, then you're making those data sets apples with apples. So location has the power to be a singular unifying force for data. And that's really powerful. So when we get in front of comms planners, for example, and you tell them, right, we know who your audiences are, and we should all be able to tell them who their audiences are. And then we can show them where they've been or where they're most likely to be in the future, where they congregate, and therefore the right media channels to target them there, that becomes really powerful.
And question to all of you. Obviously, for a long time, we've been touting the benefits and the silver bullet of deterministic data. And now we're kind of going, no, that's not really an option anymore. Let's go back to probabilistic, which at the time we were saying, you know, it wasn't fantastic. And I get that this is very different. What we're looking at now is very different from how probabilistic was being described or envisioned before. But how are you helping educate advertisers into understanding how effective these new forms of targeting can be? Chris? Sorry, Hannah, you were going to...
No, it's all right.
I'll keep it short. Outcomes and measurement, that's really what it comes down to, is showing the results, driving towards business outcomes that our clients are asking us for. So that's the very short answer. But
Yeah, I was just going to add that actually we've been using things like geo signals in out-of-home for God knows how many years, and TV as well. So those kinds of, like geo is, in theory, is just a contextual signal, and they've been the targeting that underpins those more traditionally bought channels since their inception, or since you could do geo-targeting with TV, for example. So actually, it's just about how we educate programmatic buyers and planners into that more traditional way of planning, but how we can bring those benefits of that advanced technology and measurement and that side of it that we can bring into that more traditional side of planning as well.
Right, interesting. And so those more programmatic buyers that have been, you know, keen on one-to-one, and now we're not saying it's one-to-many, it's somewhere in the middle. Is that, what are you calling it? I mean,
it's hard because it's definitely not one-to-one, but then I also don't think it's been one-to-one for a very long time, at least since GDPR. I don't know if everyone else agrees, but so at least for the last 6 years, it's not been one-to-one. So it's kind of one to fewer.
One to a few.
One to a
people.
few more. Something like I mean, but I think it's rather than looking at it as one-to-one or one-to-many and categorizing channels that way. I think we're trying now to go on more of a bit of a journey and see it as a bit more of a spectrum. So there might be some types of audiences, and where you're using something like a geo or a retail segment, and you can get pretty granular into those audiences. Like, for example, you're targeting new parents in a specific location on the suburbs of London. Like, that's pretty granular. That's probably as accurate as a cookie would go. But there might be certain types of brands, so something like an SMB audience is actually a little bit harder because some of the signals that we're using are a little bit more broad. So it's more just looking at it in terms of, like, how can we get this audience most effectively, but understanding that it might not be the same level of granularity for each type of advertiser. Can I
ask to the two agency folk, is there three agency folk, is there a risk that we go too granular with all of our targeting because we can. So you just said there's lots of different data signals. So there's a new product selling in Tesco, so we have to target left-handed vegans who drive red cars at 2:30 in a Tesco car. We could do it as an industry, and I think sometimes we should stop and kind of go, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do for the brand, because we kind of often do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's down to that, like, it's a prospecting versus, like, we know that these people buy our product, and then that's fine. But I think whenever a client's given us a brief like that, we've always pushed back that they would be missing out on opportunities, and also it's kind of one of those things where just because you're a left-handed vegan who drives a red car doesn't mean you buy corn, just because everyone who buys corn is in those characteristics. So it's that old, like, the awful analogy with Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, isn't it, that keeps getting tried around. It's that kind of thing. But
I've not heard that. I don't
have
think
you
I
not?
want to.
Oh my God. Any kind of, anyone who came in and started talking about targeting about 10 years ago, like, did this. Basically, as it goes, Prince Charles, Ozzy Osbourne, same age, same income levels,
Yes.
same interest in, like, outdoor, like, pursuits or something, completely different people. So, but you target them the same way if you use more generic segments.
Yeah, that makes sense. Emily, I want to come to you and get your perspectives on that kind of one-to-one versus one-to-many, and kind of where you sit within that and how you're able to communicate that with your clients as to what targeting looks like in the new world, basically.
I think communication is really key, and it's an education for us, but also we need to educate our clients. Oh gosh, sorry, that was really loud. A lot of our clients are very traditional. They might be, actual theatre producers that you're sat in a room with. So you have to convince them that targeting left-handed vegans is exactly where your audience is, and they're definitely going to buy a ticket for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. But also, we do a lot of the kind of prospecting side. So it's a real balance. Our clients can be very prescriptive as to what they want, and so we want to fulfill their needs, so we do that. But then we also come the other side and say, have you seen this new piece of tech? It's incredible. It combines 6 data points, search data, metadata, context, demo, and location, and your first-party data. Let's give that a go, and if it works, then they'll do it again, and it will perhaps be rolled out across kind of multiple West End show clients. So it's a balance, it's a mix, and it's a real education for us, but also to educate our clients as well.
And what would be the pushback to Hannah, Emily, and Chris, if any, from clients that are saying, no, I don't want to use that data. I want to use the stuff I've been using for the past 5 years that I know has worked for me? Because obviously, like Chris, for example, you mentioned, you just hit them with the word outcomes, it's all good. But that can't apply to every one of your clients, or does it?
Potentially resistance to change just in general. I mean, in previous roles, I was trying to tell people they need to have a plan for testing and learning with the cookie deprecation. It is challenging. Everyone's very busy with their jobs, and new changes creates disruption, which creates more work, and it just needs to be part of the job. And that's part of our job as agencies, to also do education as part of a core part of our role in how we work with our clients as well.
I think just to add to that as well, I think there's been quite an interesting divergence in the way that, obviously, a lot of the DSPs, and there's a very good reason why they're doing this, but they're focusing on those new ID solutions that almost replace cookies because that's what makes sense for their businesses. But actually, any new ID solution, unless you are an advertiser with hundreds of thousands of data points that you can input into those ID solutions, they're just not functional as a replacement for what we were previously doing with cookies. So agencies and advertisers and independent tech have kind of focused a little bit more on actually shifting the narrative away from that type of targeting completely, while still using that to drive performance where we can. So actually, what we're doing with a lot of clients is kind of taking them on a bit of a journey, because some clients are really advanced with this, they actively don't want to be using cookies anymore, and then other clients, like, they're very heavily reliant in terms of their campaigns and driving performance from this type of targeting. So we kind of have to move them away from it in a bit more of a slower process. So we start by doing little bits of tests here and there, and then we build up the percentage of those tests, and then eventually we're looking at a sort of like cookie-free targeting matrix. But yeah, it really depends on the client, and often, like, I think it's a misconception, and that would be dependent on the sort of maturity of the client. Actually, sometimes super digitally mature clients are actually the ones that either have sort of more complex data sets that can't be activated as easily, or they have really niche audiences that we have to target, and so we're still quite heavily dependent on cookies for them. So actually, it can be anywhere, but it's definitely a journey for every different client.
So that is your goal, to eventually become cookie-free?
Well, I guess that's not a sort of outright goal, but if we're saying that cookies aren't fit for purpose outside of being a single signal, what we're trying to do is move towards actually just being able to target our audiences more effectively. So whatever helps us do that, we will do. But at the moment, that very much looks like moving away from cookie-led targeting and into things like geo and retail data.
Nigel?
Sorry, it's very refreshing to be on stage with 3 agency folk that get the new world, right?
I was going to say
it's
the
really
same
not
thing.
normal. And
My next question to you is going to be, Nigel, what pushback do you receive?
Well, so the hardest pushback we get actually is you go in and you either do the presentation and they go, that's great sort of science, that looks really impressive, or we had an agency recently where we signed a deal with them, we're in play. A couple of months later, we're like, there's no briefs, anything happening. And they're like, yeah, we just don't get many location briefs. And so I'm like, oh, so you don't, I obviously don't say this. My internal monologue then goes, oh, so you don't actually care about understanding who your customers are, where they shop. Okay, cool. And, I spoke to Nick Ashley recently, who's head of Tesco Media. He said something like, I can't remember, the 80-something plus, significantly into the 80s, is how much product is shifted by Tesco in a shop. People, real humans, physically walking into a real shop and walking out with products. And we spend, I think, far too long obsessing around the digital world, digital behaviors, device behaviors, and not enough time thinking about what we can do to get people into those stores. And great session on retail media recently. We know it's really cool. It's a really hot topic at the moment, but it's almost all about in-store loyalty, purchases, and data. And hardly any about understanding the journey that a customer makes from their sofa to the store. Connected TV in-house, sequential messaging in out-of-home and mobile, and then point of sale at the store, and and then the supermarket takes over with their in-store stuff. And so having a we don't get many location briefs is a very common soul. So that's why we're not doing much.
I want to take the opportunity to get the results of the poll up, if I can ask for that, please, because the question was around kind of what barriers there are to using alternative targeting methods like area-based marketing. And the responses were, I don't receive enough relevant briefs, my tech partners don't offer these alternatives, difficulty in scaling campaigns effectively, lack of reliable data, or all of the above. So the outright winner is scaling difficulties. A few people have said what you feared, Nigel, which is, I don't receive enough relevant briefs. Anything
fewer than I thought there would be, actually.
Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, absolutely. Any surprises there? Any concerns? Do any of you agree with that?
I think the reliable data one is interesting because I think what I would question on that is how we're measuring reliability for cookies. Because as I mentioned before, like I know for a fact that my cookies are wrong. But I know that I can't lie about where I've been. So
understanding of what reliability means, isn't
exactly.
It?
What do we mean with that? If what we mean is more like reliable data in terms of like we know what we're getting and we know what we're going to get from it from historical things, then fine. But if it's that we don't know what that data actually contains, like I would argue that we don't really have that with cookies either.
Chris, you guys say something?
Yeah, I was going to say the difficulty in scaling campaigns effectively was the one that kind of caught my attention. I kind of had the opposite thinking. I thought that would probably be one of the lowest ones on the list. I think about that because we think about a portfolio approach to addressability. Start with your first-party data, maximize the effectiveness of that, but it runs out at some point in time, or it may not be best suited for the goals you're trying to use or accomplish with it for that specific campaign. So what do you do next? You move to the next most effective addressability signal, and then the next and the next as you move through this kind of effectiveness versus scale curve in that way. And so that's just the way we think about it there. So scale is rarely ever the issue in our world there. There's never a brief that comes through that is too big for us to solve for when we take the addressability or the portfolio approach to addressability in that way.
I guess, I was going to say, just to add, it depends if we're looking at scaling from like a quite very niche location targeting. If we're talking about that long targeting, then fine. Like we can't scale that. Like it's obscene to think that we can. But in terms of being able to do that kind of modeling and using lots of different data sets, scale isn't as difficult.
I mean, I wasn't so surprised by seeing that result. I thought that that's what people might say, because it's probably what I would say, but then because you sort of imagine seeing that very tight geofence around a certain area, and clients think, oh, we're just going to target people that are there. But once that's combined with other data points and sort of that probabilistic algorithm, and, you know, for us, like, if we can use it to kind of fill the gaps of, you know, ticket sale data broken down by postcode, combined with all different data points, and finding the people that haven't bought a ticket to those shows yet, and targeting those people rather than the people that are in that kind of small, tightly geofenced area that you think of when you think of location targeting, or people that have walked past the theatre. It's quite rare that people are just going to pop in for a, you know, a quite expensive ticket price for a show. So I think, again, that's an education piece, and I think, you know, agencies and clients need to work more closer together, and I think that's one of the main takeouts from cookieless, even though it's not going to happen anytime soon, that's the main takeout, just working together more closely and actually getting that direct first-party data from the clients and plugging it into these tech platforms, algorithms, and kind of seeing the results from those and seeing how effective they are, and then showing the clients and being like, this worked, it's really good.
Give us a chance. I can prove to you this actually is effective. One thing I wanted to raise as well is something that's come up with in other conversations is my tech partner's not offering these alternatives. Is that something you come across, Nigel? Obviously,
I wish it was.
But, okay.
Yeah, that 10% of people stay behind after class. Yeah, look, I think most tech companies do GEO. Right?
Yeah.
But GEO is a very broad church of chuck me a list of postcodes and I'll stick some ads near them if I can, and out of home. You know, for 50 years has been advertising on proximity to, you know, drive time, store support and stuff. So, yeah, I think GEO exists, and that's probably why it scores quite a low score, because people can offer some of it. But the way I think that the three agency folk on stage have talked about it, not many people can do that. But again, I think these three they've been picked because they get this
because
new
they know what
world.
they're talking about. Yes.
Well, I think
kind of
this
how
is
we like to do it.
This is a bit of an education arc for me. You know, I think that the difficulty is that's an easy one for me I think for all of us to pitch against. I think likewise the lack of reliable data, that would be a really easy question to answer in a meeting, particularly when you're comparing it to, as you say, cookie data, which could be 10, 15 years old, and you know you were having a kebab and a pint outside a Fitness First, and you live in a gym segment for the rest of your life. So, yeah, I think they're easy to address to those issues.
And between us, we've used the words area, location, geo. Does the word location kind of potentially cause concerns, like, because people think location just means right where that person is at that exact point in time, and it puts them off? Should we be what should we be calling it?
I don't know the answer to that question. I use GEO. So
use GEO.
Generally I would use GEO,
right.
Because I'm using that to refer to anything down from like coordinates all the way up to like TV region. So to me that's a geography. But I guess you could call it a location. I saw in some of the questions you posted put area. But yeah, personally I use GEO, but I don't know if that actually is the best thing. So if anyone
+1 on GEO.
GEO.
Yeah, location sounds quite.
We just changed it as an industry.
Oh,
That's the main thing. Yeah.
You've been saying area.
We call area-based marketing, but it is ultimately, as Hannah said, it's GEO. It's
no one's saying location, which is
it's a cartographic pyramid of broadcast to targeted, and I think yeah, but language is important, and I do think that location has a 15-year-old view of GPS data, media owners promising or tech companies promising they can serve an ad to that bit of carpet to force people they'll get served a banner ad and they will inexplicably run into a shop and buy 8 Big Macs. So that does happen. Actually, if you think about air as a much more holistic understanding of knowing where your target market are and what they can do on the back of it, and retail stores, then it changes the conversation. So I think GEO is...
Yeah, I think also we want to be able to include journeys within the data. So like, for example, I don't live in London, but I do work in London. So if you were to just target me at home and then at work, like I'm in 2 different regions of the UK. So let alone just one city. So actually, like what we need to be able to looking at is like there are certain products or certain services and certain ways of targeting me as a commuter with someone with like over an hour commute that we need to know about those journeys as well. So I think location makes it a bit too fixed.
So even journey comes loaded.
Yeah.
Like a customer journey in our world is they've gone onto a website, they've clicked on a banner, and actually customer journeys. No, it's a physical person going to your shop. Yeah, they've moved.
I was just going to say area might be more of a marketing tactic, where geo is much more of the actual activation methodology in that way. So area-based marketing versus geo activation.
Interesting. I've just seen the time. So my final question to you all is what you think the future of precision targeting looks like. You know, we've referred to this panel as a transformation of precision targeting. You've all highlighted some really great alternative options that are not cookies or, as Nigel said, cookies with masks on. Where do we go from here? Like, what are you excited about in terms of what the opportunities look like? Because you all seem very fairly advanced in kind of that journey of looking at alternatives and working with your clients to target your audiences differently. Where does it go from here? Chris, I'm going to start with you.
I think it really comes back to kind of what I originally started by saying is really about stitching together online and offline data sets, building a much more comprehensive view in terms of the moment in time, not just a one-to-one to individual. It's much more than that. And so incorporating retail intelligence into everything that we do, that's something that we're looking into. So, or continuing to advance our capabilities in that way.
Great. Emily?
I think there is massive opportunity, and what I'm quite excited about and where I think the future is going is testing ad and creative and what kind of creative that we're serving to these people within, you know, if we're not using cookie-based targeting. And I think that is something that we are already starting to do. We have been doing for a little while now, testing different, you know, the alternatives and what creative we're serving to those particular audiences and what is returning, and not just in terms of ROI, but actually, you know, ticket sales and wraps and what ticket prices people are buying and what, you know, how many, and all that kind of information. I think is really, really interesting, really exciting.
Brilliant. Hannah?
I think the future for me would be slightly redefining what we mean by precision. So rather than thinking of it in that kind of like one-to-one thing, it's we're thinking about what's the best way of reaching our audience to reach our desired outcomes, rather than what's the best way of reaching our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And finally, Nigel.
Yeah, I agree. The very loud conversation around cookies has meant that agencies and clients are already understanding that there's a shift to something else. We have a saying that everything happens somewhere, whether that's in the physical world or the context in which you're consuming something online. And I think increasingly that's going to become more important.
Brilliant. We're out of time. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion. Thank you very much, my panelists, Nigel, Hannah, Emily, and Chris. Give them a round of applause. Thank you.